So now we're going to look at the oxygen release and the carbon dioxide pickup, right? And so we mentioned before that there's three mechanisms where carbon dioxide is transported through the body. So carbon dioxide is transported via either dissolved through plasma, binding to hemoglobin, but the most efficient way is dissolving into bicarbonate, being converted into bicarbonate and dissolving into the blood plasma, right? And so here's just a nice little mechanism of understanding what's going on. So in blue, I'm going to show you direction of where everything is going, okay? So first off, when we look at oxygen release and carbon dioxide pickup, immediately you should be thinking this is referring to the tissue and the tissues, because the tissue is where you have a high prevalence of carbon dioxide. So you want to pick up the carbon dioxide and transport it out into the respiratory system for the excretion, right? When you expire. Vice versa in the tissue, when you want to release it, into the tissue and utilize this oxygen for cellular respiration in order to generate ATP. All right. So when we look at first the direction, okay, so there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide that's present normally in the tissues. So there's a lot of CO2 just naturally building up based off of a metabolic byproducts of cellular respiration. So what happens is the CO2 now, the carbon dioxide, goes out of the tissues and enters the interstitial fluid in the interstitial space, right? After this region, now it goes into the blood plasma, right? So this entire region is the blood plasma. This little box here I have is the red blood cell. So the way the carbon dioxide is converted into bicarbonate is through the combination of this molecular mechanism of carbon dioxide and water, giving you this molecule, right? So you have CO2 coming out into the interstitial space, now into the blood plasma, and it can either be converted into bicarbonate via either the plasma, but there's a more efficient way when it actually enters the red blood cell. So it enters the red blood cell here, and carbon dioxide combined with water gets converted to this acid, right? And so this acid is called carbonic acid. And this conversion takes place specifically with this enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. Carbonic anhydrase is an enzyme that speeds up this reaction, so it makes it more efficient, right? It's a catalyst which converts the carbon dioxide with the help of the assistance of water into carbonic acid, right? And so if we look here at carbonic acid, what you have to realize is in the blood plasma there is a high prevalence of water, right? So an acid, definition of an acid is a proton donor. So when it's in a polar medium, for example, blood, which has water, it dissociates immediately, right? So it doesn't remain in this stable form. And so what happens is these bonds break. So one of the hydrogens gets released out and the other bicarbonate, now you have bicarbonate that's formed. So this is bicarbonate. Bicarbonates, then what happens is it diffuses outwards and it goes into the blood plasma where it dissolves, right? It has a negative charge, it's a polar molecule, so it dissolves in there. And so now you have bicarbonate outside in the blood plasma, right? One thing that happens before anything is there's a phenomenon of a change in electrical potential, right? So this entire cell, the red blood cell, whenever it loses the bicarbonate, becomes more positive. It loses a negative, so it becomes more positive, right? And you have to maintain this electrostatic balance, right? And so what happens is there are these little channels, chloride channels, that are open and are open usually when there is an abnormality in the electrical balance. And so you have actually an influx of chloride coming in from the outside. So chlorine comes in from the outside. This is called the chloride shift, right? So whenever the negative charge is released, that negative charge needs to be recompensated. So the chlorine comes into the red blood cell to maintain the electrical potential of the red blood cell. Now, we see that one of the bicarbonate was released out into the plasma. However, what happens to this remaining hydrogen, right? So this remaining hydrogen comes in and leads to the reduction of the oxyhemoglobin. So you remember, oxygen is being, majority of the cases, is carried by hemoglobin, right? So carbon dioxide also is carried by hemoglobin, but oxygen has a higher affinity. So, and it's more efficient to go through this bicarbonate pathway for carbon dioxide, right? So this hydrogen comes in here and actually reduces this oxygenated hemoglobin, right? And this reduction here, so now you have this reduced hemoglobin, allows for the oxygen to be now released into the plasma, right? So the blood plasma now allows for the diffusion of the oxygen to go into the interstitial fluid in the interstitial space, and now oxygen now is transferred here into the tissue for cellular respiration, right? And so this is a phenomenon known as the oxygen release and the carbon dioxide pickup that happens specifically in the tissues.